been a couple years now since I made the video discussing career paths for computer science students, and it's always been a question on my channel of what field should I choose, and I understand that because there's so many different fields and emphasis within computer science that you can go. You can be a software engineer, a DBA, a data analyst, cybersecurity expert. You can get into the field of artificial intelligence, and there are many subfields within those fields I just listed, one of which being data science. I single out data science because just last week I had the honor of speaking with Ken Jee, who is a fellow YouTuber and a professional data scientist. And you may recognize that name because I've mentioned in the past as my new coding project, Project Engagement, is actually based on a project that he built, and we're rebuilding it for scalability. But that's not what I want to talk about today. Today I want to talk about career paths for computer science students. I don't like to talk on things that I'm not well versed in, which is exactly why I invited Ken on to speak from the viewpoint of a data scientist. My hopes for y'all is that you leave this video having a better understanding of what it's like to be a data scientist and how to get there, and we'll do that by discussing everything from the thought of I want to be a data scientist to him actually becoming a data scientist and everything in between. That includes education, internships, jobs, the interviews in order to get those, and the day in the life of a data scientist. Now, I am going to be condensing down our 1 hour talk into hopefully what is maybe 15-20 minutes. I'm obviously going to be cutting out a lot. My idea is to be able to give you full context of everything that was discussed, but within a manageable time frame of 15-20 minutes. So the first thing I asked Ken is, what got you interested in data science? When did you know that you wanted this to be your career?
You know, it's funny. I was probably doing a reasonable amount of data science already before I realized that it was even a career path. I started out very interested in understanding my performance in sports, so particularly golf. I was playing that at a fairly high level, and I was always looking for a way to gain an advantage. And one of the first ways I saw was to study my own statistics, to study my game, using some standard deviations, using very, very basic things. And I was able to improve, and that kind of got me excited about using statistics or using analysis in different areas. So from me playing golf, I eventually got interested in playing daily fantasy sports. And I started building models to try and predict outcomes there. And then, I eventually went back to school and I learned more techniques and I started doing more of this analysis on sports. And then I realized, hey, oh my goodness, like there are people that do this for a living.
Yeah.
And those people are called data analysts or data scientists. So me pulling on the thread of trying to answer a question or trying to frame problems that I was really interested in relating to sports is what led me down this road. It wasn't the other way around where I was like, I want to be a data scientist because I saw they make a lot of money and they're really cool. It's like, I want the skill set to answer these questions. And that skill set happens to be that of a data scientist. And I eventually just kind of ended up there.
So you had an interest in something, in beating all your friends in fantasy sports by getting the analytics and destroying them, right? But then you took that and it's just something that interests you and you're like, oh wait, there's an actual term for this, a job for this, and it's data science. Let me see if I can make this a job. It kind of went that way?
Essentially, yeah.
Ken went about this perfectly, and it almost makes me jealous because he didn't look at a job and say, I want to be that. He found, I don't know if I want to call it a passion of his, but something that he enjoyed doing, an interest of his, and figured out how to turn that into a career. And I want to get the whole picture. So I know he has a bachelor's in economics, among other degrees, but I wanted to start there. I asked him, was he working in economics after he obtained his bachelor's in economics?
So I wasn't. So after college, I went down and I tried to play professional golf for about 6 months, maybe a little longer. The numbers suggested to me that I was not good enough to do that sustainably and make money.
Got to try to follow your dream, though.
Exactly.
I respect it.
I mean, at least I tried, and I put that one to bed, which is nice. There's so many people where it's what ifs and those types of things, but I, after that, wanted to get into management consulting. I thought that would have given me the most options after golf to pursue anything I really wanted. So I went back and I did grad school the first time for, I guess it's global commerce at the University of Virginia. Okay. And so I learned some technical skills there. So I learned a little bit of SQL. We did some statistics, some modeling using SPSS. Obviously, that's not what most data scientists use now, but that whet my palate. That gave me more tools to be able to start doing these types of analyses. And I did end up working in management consulting for about a year.
Very
And
cool.
while I was in that year is when the interest in data science or the interest in solving those sports problems really took off. That's a lot of what I was doing in my free time, was trying to build these models. And I should say, before I went back and got that master's in global commerce, I did intern at DraftKings. So I got
Oh,
a
cool.
taste of what that was all like. I got,
Yeah.
I wasn't doing specifically data analytics. It was kind of like marketing analytics, but I got a taste of all of the data that they had, the problems they were solving with data, the types of things that were possible if I learned these new skills. And it absolutely blew my mind, the types of questions that I could answer that I thought were almost impossible to answer.
Okay.
And that's really exciting for me.
So I wanted to make sure I heard things right because I'm friends with Ken. I know that he has a master's in computer science, but he also just said he has a bachelor's in economics and a master's in global commerce. So I asked him, did you end up getting that master's degree in global commerce?
I did. And then
Okay.
I also got another one in computer science after that.
Of course you did.
Well,
That's wild. So
I
you had
realized,
master.
Yep. So I realized that, the skills that I currently had, data science, as I learned more, there's a heavy programming element. And I felt that in my previous master's degrees and for my undergrad, I got enough of the statistics where I was comfortable. I had a good foundation in that. But admittedly, to that point, I had not written a single line of code.
Excuse me, one more time?
I had not written a single line of code.
So you heard that, right? He hadn't even touched coding at all. He hadn't touched computer science yet. He just had a familiarity with the numbers and statistics.
That is correct, yes.
Okay,
Pretty
so
rare.
so from your very first line of code to landing your job as a data scientist, how many years was that?
I probably landed my first data science internship about a year after,
Your first line of code.
a little bit more than a year after my
Okay.
first line of code, yeah.
What about your full-time? So that would maybe be 2 to 3 years after your first line of code where you got your full-time job?
Yeah, about 2.5. In terms of the programming timeline, so a lot of people will say, how'd you get a master's in computer science without having studied it in undergrad? I think that there's 4 or 5 programs in the US that allow you to do that. So, and getting a master's in data science, which is also an option, the requirements for that are even generally less than the computer science programs. But so what happens there is you do 6 crash courses to get essentially an undergraduate level understanding of computer science, and then you go into like a normal master's program.
Okay.
So I mean, it was a pain. Like I had to take 2 systems courses, 2 data structures courses, an intro programming course, and a discrete math. And I took all of those over the course of a summer.
Oh no.
And so after the first, that's a lot
That's a
in
lot.
a short period of time.
Yeah, because summer semesters are shorter.
Yeah, and so after that, I did well. I got A's in all my courses, but
Yeah.
I was like, do I want to do this? Is it all going to be like this with this much work? And then I realized that it wasn't all like that.
As we're talking about the programming side of things, Ken said something that I found very interesting. I'd like for you to hear.
Like I saw a tremendous value in being able to program and being able to build things. And I wanted to jump all the way in on that ship. And to me, the most logical thing at that time was to go back and get a degree in computer science. In hindsight, I mean, I went into a lot of student debt for these degrees. And I think that the online resources that are available now are definitely good enough to get you that the education and the understanding of these things. But again, at the time, I wasn't aware of all these online resources.
But I want to touch on that real quick. As you and I know, you can get a job as a software engineer straight out of your computer science degree, or you can be self-taught. Companies are very open to hiring developers, self-taught or with a degree or from a boot camp. There's so many different ways to get to that point. But I have no idea how it goes in the world of data science. So I asked him, how much do you think that master's degree in computer science helped you land your job as opposed to just learning everything online and being a self-taught data scientist?
I think it does help to have an advanced degree as a data scientist. There is sometimes, like in invisible barrier, like a threshold that companies use.
Yeah.
That's like another box to check. Do they have a graduate degree?
Yeah. Sometimes a filter process. If you don't have it,
Exactly.
resume in the
I
trash.
I personally believe that that's stupid. I think there are
Sure.
plenty of people that are more qualified than even I am that don't have advanced degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that
I
this
agree
is
with that.
changing a little bit. At least in my interview process, I'm always looking at the portfolio first.
Mm-hmm.
If someone has a stronger portfolio and no master's degree than someone who has a master's degree
Mm-hmm.
and like a lot weaker portfolio, I am a lot more personally inclined to choose the person with a stronger portfolio.
Yeah. I think that's the only way to go about it.
Yeah, the trend is generally going that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I don't generally recommend people to go get a master's degree, especially if they have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like my biggest thing is don't go into debt for school. There's free resources. It's probably a little harder, but you can get to the same destination. To me, I'm like money sensitive related to that because I do have a lot of student loan debt.
Yeah.
And, fortunately I can cover it,
Sure.
a little bit thanks to YouTube. But, to me, that's a decision you should really carefully scrutinize. I'm someone that has always learned well in the classroom, but as I've grown and matured, I can learn outside of the classroom now.
Sure.
Ken 5 years ago probably couldn't have.
Okay.
So that
That's
introspection is also really important.
Yeah. So for those of you who can learn on your own, basically all you need to do is subscribe to Ken Jee, and then you'll be able to learn everything about data science and take his job. That's all you really need to do.
Exactly, right?
But really, subscribe to Ken. I'm going to leave his links down below, YouTube channel, his LinkedIn, as well as his Twitter. Even if you're not interested in data science, what's really cool about this is that, as you know, I'm working on project engagement with him. And from my perspective, on my channel, you're going to be seeing what it's like to build a web app from the software engineer's perspective. However, Ken on the project is the project manager. So on his channel, you'll be able to see what it's like to be a PM on a project like this, where it is him as a project manager, Tina Hung as the data scientist, and me as the software engineer. Let's get back to it. At this point, Ken has had 1 data science internship and 2 data science jobs. So I asked him, how did he go about attaining these jobs?
So I went through traditional and non-traditional channels. So for the internship, I just applied through a normal internship process.
Mm-hmm.
I probably applied to about 50 companies for the data science internships during that period.
Same resume, or did you cater your resume to each job listing?
I had 2 resumes. So I had what I describe as my artsy resume, and then I have a very like corporate cold resume that I'd send out. Actually, in one of the interview processes, I said I brought both of the resumes.
Yeah.
Because they'd already brought me into the interview, and I asked them like which one they prefer, and it happened to be, I guess I can say it was GE, and that's where I did my summer internship, and they were like, we prefer the like cold corporate one.
Yeah. Wow.
And admittedly, right when I left the company, the stock price tanked like 40%. So
they caught wind of Ken leaving the company.
Yeah, it must have been that. Right? But so that interview process was fairly straightforward. I interviewed in quite a few. So there's a company in California I interviewed at where I basically sat in a Zoom call with 12 other candidates, and we watched this guy talk about the company, and we had to give feedback.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, I had already locked up the internship at GE, and I was like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I was on a trip for work, and we were at the PGA show, I think. Mm-hmm. And I just like wanted to go hit drivers and try out all the new technology. And I had this 1.5-hour call with this company where we're all sitting, everyone's in like a suit and tie.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're in, I don't know, like a golf shirt or something.
Oh, no.
I screwed this one up.
Yeah.
And like after it started like that, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this one out. That in hindsight is something I should not have done. But a lot of it, there is diversity, a lot of diversity, even in the data science internship process. Mm-hmm. For GE, I went in, they asked me some technical questions. They asked me some like storytelling questions to describe an analysis. And I asked me some like basic stuff on my resume, but I didn't have to do a programming assessment. I didn't have to do a lot of these things, which was a little bit surprising to me. Mm-hmm. There are a couple other internships that I applied to where I did have to do that. That's generally the norm. So the structure usually goes, you do an intro phone call. Sometimes there's a technical phone screen where they ask you to explain, for example, what like a p-value is, right?
Yeah.
Or they'll ask you to explain how an algorithm works. So like,
Sure.
what's the difference between classification and clustering, or whatever that may be, or when would you use principal component analysis, things like that. Next, you'll usually get sent a coding assessment or a take-home test, where they give you some data and they want you to analyze it and return with an insight. You can either, they'll usually do that, especially now over online,
Yeah.
but occasionally they'll do that in person, like a SQL assessment, a leap code style question. Then you'll be brought in for an interview. You'll have anywhere between 2 and 5 or 6, but they'll be about half behavioral and half technical. On the technical side, they'll either ask statistics questions, they might ask you to do some coding whiteboarding, or they'll ask you to walk through and explain an analysis. So a question that I was asked early on, I think it was at DraftKings, was they'd asked me if there's like a train station and there's a lot more volume in the morning, like the trains are way too full. Essentially, what can we do? And the data we have is from the ticket machine. When people are putting the tickets, the volume of tickets that are coming in, wherever that is. So how can we use that data to like get insights out of it? And one thing is like you look at the distribution of what people are coming in. You can increase price, which would likely reduce demand. You can do some other things like have more trains in the morning, whatever it would be. So you're explaining how you use data to solve a question or solve a problem like that.
So you get a job, but how do you know it's going to be enjoyable? So I wanted to ask Ken what it's like as a day in the life of a data scientist, and not just what he's currently doing, but also comparing the internship to one of his full-time jobs to the other full-time job that he's ultimately at now, because it sounds like where you're working now is a bit more enjoyable than maybe those other places. What's that smile for? You like?
No,
it's true.
It's very true. Yeah. But I mean, again, like those are all great places to work. I met awesome people. I really enjoyed my experience as I went. I'm someone that I like the ride. I like to understand different scenarios.
Yeah, and there's pros and cons to everything.
Exactly. And so working as a data scientist varies very much by company. I mean, the field is still relatively new in a sense, where it hasn't necessarily found its identity. I think it's probably safer to say that a software engineer in one company, their roles and expectation is probably more similar to a software engineer in another company than a data scientist role in one company compared to a data scientist role in another company.
Is that heavily dependent on industry?
Industry is important. Size of company is important.
Okay.
Data literacy, data maturity is really important. A normal day, though, is usually, at least the teams that I've been working with, they operate using Scrum. So you have a stand-up in the morning. You usually work in around 2-week sprints. Can be a little more, can be a little less. And you're working on projects based in those timeframes. So, let's say I had to do a new project for GE where we're trying to understand train maintenance and how often we should be like checking on the train, the like wheel wells or something, right?
Yeah.
So my focus for that 2-week sprint would be to get to a certain stage in that process. And as a data scientist, one of the nice things is you generally have a lot of autonomy to work on these things, less so than a software engineer. So as a data scientist, you're a little bit more involved in the business decisions because you're reporting directly to business stakeholders. Rather than reporting up the chain of command through like engineering like managers for the most part. And of course that varies by company. So you have more autonomy than like a business person, but less autonomy than a software engineer for the most part.
Okay, I see.
So there's like it's kind of that middle hybrid position in a lot of companies. In larger companies, you're usually working on fewer things, but you're working very deep into them. So like again, if I'm a GE, I might only be working on train wheels. That might be the only thing that my job consists of, and I'm trying to build models and optimize those. At a startup, you might be working on a different project each month.
Yeah.
That's completely unrelated. You might be doing stuff that also is like some front-end development or building out dashboards or reporting tools. So it is really hard to say what the normal day in the life is like. I just essentially described my experience across 3 different companies from those couple examples. So
okay, I see. Fair enough. Would you say your work-life balance is fairly even?
Yeah, I think that for data science, it's a little bit like lumpy. Like sometimes you're working a lot, sometimes you're not working that much.
Yeah.
And that is because the work is usually project based. So
Yeah.
you're focused on like essentially sort of time bound things. One thing that does make it difficult is that it's a lot harder to estimate the time of a data science project than a traditional software engineering project, right?
Yeah.
Because some of the things that you're doing are new or exploratory,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really hard to time bound exploratory analysis, right? So that's a challenge, especially related to project management with data science, is like, can you rush the exploration process? Should you rush the exploration process? How do you estimate it? It's
Yeah,
like,
you don't really have a baseline. So in your day in a life, what type of tools do you use? What programming languages?
so a lot of data scientists, or most data scientists, will be focusing primarily on Python.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a little bit more on the research side, some people will be using R as well. I
Mm-hmm.
personally prefer Python. I came from using more traditional coding languages like Java, C. So Python is
Java.
a little bit more similar to those than R is to those. So it's just a more natural
Mm-hmm. More
translation to
familiar.
me.
That's right.
Data science consists of a couple different parts. So the first is data exploration and visualization. So in Python, we're using tools like matplotlib, you have plotly, you have Altair. There's a bunch of different graphics packages where you can essentially, build visuals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can also use a GUI tool like Tableau or Power BI if you want something relatively quick. For modeling, data scientists are often using scikit-learn. That's a very common package for building different types of regression, classification, and clustering algorithms.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, some data scientists, not all data scientists, are doing deep learning or computer vision or some of these advanced things. A lot of those we're using neural nets for. So you're generally using PyTorch, TensorFlow, Keras, which can, I believe, sit on top of either of those. There's also Fast AI. There's a couple other frameworks I'm probably forgetting,
Mm-hmm.
but those are the things you're using to build these deep neural nets that are kind of on the future of, or more towards the cutting edge of what the technology can do.
We've learned a lot so far, but there's one question that the world wants to know. So I asked him, is it data scientist or data scientist?
Admittedly, I say both.
I know, I've
And it
noticed it. And then
drives some people
I tried to mirror
nuts.
you right after you said data scientist, and I said data scientist. The next thing you say is data scientist. I'm like, well, that's what I've been saying the whole time, and now you change it up. I'm confused.
Maybe I just do that to keep people on their toes. It's like
Yeah.
a cognitive trick, or maybe I'm
You don't
just
want me to get
linguistic.
comfortable.
Exactly.
Well, okay, that didn't really answer anything, but figured we'd ask. Now that you've gotten a better understanding of the whole entire story of a particular data scientist, maybe you are interested in data science, not only am I going to ask you to go ahead and subscribe to Ken's channel because that is what he does, but I also asked Ken if you were interested, regardless of becoming a data scientist or you just want to play around with numbers, how to get started. What languages, what tools should someone use if they want to mess around with numbers and maybe improve their golf game?
Yeah, I recommend starting with Python.
Mm-hmm.
Pandas is, I probably should have mentioned that. So pandas and NumPy are what you use to manipulate data and make it accessible to be put into a lot of these algorithms. So I'd get familiar just manipulating data with those.
Mm-hmm.
If you've had no programming experience at all, you could even start in Excel. I mean, data science is about the solution you get,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the methodology you use. I mean, the methodology is important. It has to be like correct.
Sure.
But the tool, data science should be in theory tool agnostic. Like we want to just match the tool to the problem we're solving.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm analyzing my golf game when I was doing that way early in my career, I was doing that all in Excel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. I still found value in it.
Exactly.
If you're doing this to say, hey, I'm putting this in my portfolio to look good for jobs, then you probably want to be using the tools that they use on the job,
Mm-hmm.
which are primarily Python, Pandas, NumPy, and then one of the visualization tools. Matplotlib or Seaborn are probably the two most common.
Okay.
But a lot of the other ones that I mentioned, I've experimented with this year and I've had a lot of fun with.
Good to know. And if anyone ever wants to see more about like beginner projects that you can do if you have nothing in mind, or like those types of tools that you should use as a beginner. I'm sure you have some videos on your YouTube channel as well to kind of help guide beginners get into the space.
Yeah, I have exactly that. The best website for learning any of this is called Kaggle.com.
Kaggle.
Kaggle.
Mm-hmm.
And they have intro programming courses. They have intro to machine learning courses. It's all free. And they have just a bunch of data that's there too.
Very nice.
So you can take some of these data sets and analyze it, and you can see how other people like myself have analyzed that data. So I have a bunch of, they're called kernels there.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just essentially Jupyter notebooks or text files that show all of my code, and you can run the code cells and see how I've gone and approached this analysis. So, to me, the best way to break in or learn any of these things are, one, to probably take those micro courses, and then two, to do your own projects, but also go through and look at what other people who are like advanced data scientists already have done when solving these projects. So
Okay.
you're seeing what you could be doing in a couple months or maybe a couple years, and you're speeding up that learning curve a lot by just seeing how other people are doing it, how they're kind of jumping into how their brain works.
Ken, again, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge with us and to give us a little bit of better understanding of what it's like to be a data scientist and everything that it takes to get there. Because as computer science students, it can be confusing, especially if you're ill-informed on what a career entails and how to get to that career. So getting a better understanding of what it takes to be a data scientist or a software engineer or a cybersecurity expert, that will allow you to make the best decision for your career. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate a big thumbs up. While you're down there, I'd appreciate if you turn that red subscribe button to a gray one, because we have a lot in store with project engagement and a lot of other projects that I have going on, like Arch Linux, the Office rebuild, and the web app itself. And again, that'll be from the point of view as a software engineer. If you want to see it from a point of view of a project manager and or are interested in data science, follow Ken. I will leave all of his links in the description below. Thank you for watching.